Hi, this is Francis from McCaffrey Crafts, and today I have someone that I've been meaning to chat with for a while. I've been following his channel on YouTube for the last few months, and I think he's a very knowledgeable, credible guy as well that I want to kind of introduce to the community. And I'm sure a lot of you guys would probably know him already because he is within the martial arts, within the stick fighting, within this community we have. And I just thought it'd be very interesting to get onto this channel, and I hope he's interested to come back as well. Like his channel name is called the Rumbling Kern. I will put a link in that towards the end as well. And I suggest you definitely have a watch. His content is going to go through the roof, I think. I want to highlight as well. He needs to get over 1,000 subscribers. So everyone who's watching this, go to his channel straight away and subscribe. Pause this. You can come back and watch this another time. Go to his channel and subscribe. And because the more interest that is shown on his content, is really going to grow. So anyway, look, Nathan, as always, I'm talking too much. Tell everyone who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, so as you said, the Rambling Kerns, the YouTube channel, I guess myself and kind of my involvement in this world kind of begins when I was a young lad, basically a teenager. Like we were saying before we came on there, back in the Yahoo forum days. So I was, about 15 when I started doing historical reenactments. And then through that, kind of wondered if there was any sort of martial arts that were going on in Ireland, because I was doing karate and boxing as a young lad. And I was like, oh, I wonder, do we have our own?
Oh, it seems to have lost there, Nathan, for a second. We'll see if he comes back again. This happens sometimes. So just give him a moment or two to come back. All right. But as I was saying there, he's a guy who has a credible background. Oh, wait, I think he's back now. Yeah. Sorry, you did.
That was a short interrupt. So yeah, got into all that in my youth. Then by the time college rolled around, I had learned about the two styles, about the Doyle style and the Antrim style, and I had a lot of interest in them. And then I got the opportunity to do my certificate in the Doyle style in 2013. That's about 9 years ago now. And from there, so I was training and competing in MMA at the time. So I kind of wanted this to road test it basically and see how it held up. So then I teamed up with the Dog Brothers. So for anyone who doesn't know what they are, I recommend you just go YouTube it. So it's they kind of did for weapon fighting what the UFC did for unarmed fighting. They just basically put on some masks, got some sticks, and bet each other and found out what worked. So I thought that was the best way to go and test it. So went and did stuff with them for a good few years, and then I got quite bad injury. I had to get my wrist kind of screwed back together basically, and from there I was kind of getting back going. I was getting ready to go again, and obviously 2020 rolled around and the world changed, so getting back on form. And then more recently with the channel itself, kind of inspired by a friend of mine, Tom Langhorne, Fan Dabby Dozy as he's known, basically hikes through Scotland in Highlander kit. I was kind of thinking, well, that's stuff I do without filming and getting any interest, so I was like, I may as well film that and see how it goes. So the channel is kind of all focused on Irish military history and military pursuits as such, and martial pursuits. So a big part is focused in on the Kern, just because I think it's a really fascinating part of history that most Irish people have no idea about. And kind of after that 1600 period, being Irish was kind of outlawed. So that's like, for me, the pinnacle of when Irish people were very much doing their own thing. So yeah, the channel kind of focuses in on Irish stick fighting. I also run a collar and elbow class in Dublin. So if anyone doesn't know, that was basically the indigenous style of wrestling that we had. Given the name because of the grips, you have fixed grip, right hand on the collar, left hand on their elbow, and the first person to fall loses. And yeah, that's basically the what I'm up to. So
that's a Friday night in Kerry.
Yes, it's a scrap at the pub.
You see plenty of old fellas doing the collar and elbow. Like if you've ever seen fight between old guys. They're holding each other and they're pulling. So
Yeah.
quite interesting. So look, to start with, I'm going to ask you, like, what is the Kern? What is the kind of clothing and the type of things that these Irish guys used to have, and what have you learned from like testing it out and trying it? And we can start there with some of these things. So your channel's called the Rambling Kern. So why not
Yes.
let's tell people what a Kern is.
Yeah, so I mean, Kern or Kern, there's no K's in Irish for anyone who's new to the language. So the Kern was just a kind of catch-all term for an Irish warrior or soldier, but by the 1500s, they kind of became known as their own entity, especially among the English who were on the island at the time, and especially the wood Kern, who kind of become very notable for just ambushing British people as they went through the forest. But the clothing at the time kind of becomes the very distinctive part of it. So you have the Lena, which I have a video on, which is a very distinctive bit of clothes with massive flowing sleeves. And that was dyed with saffron. And to kind of give people context, it was a shirt that would have cost you in modern money about $3,000. So it was a pricey bit of kit that everyone tried to get a new one every year. And as a result, it even came to be outlawed how much cloth you could even wear by the British, because it was a way to kind of basically kind of impose their will upon Irish society at the time. And then quite a distinct kind of jacket with open sleeves, again, most likely just to highlight the sleeves of the lane of the shirt that they were wearing. And interestingly enough, one thing that we see, especially in artwork all the time, is that Irish people were barefoot and bare-legged quite often. And that was one thing, especially on my hike, that I learned very quickly was kind of necessary when you're going through step bogs in Ireland with historical footwear that's not really waterproof. You kind of are better off just taking the shoes off and walking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because that's a very good point. I saw that in your video where you're going in the mountains on one of the worst days in Ireland, like typical Ireland day, and
80-kilometer winds.
you see, that's the thing. You have to test things out and try things to know. And you've kind of looked at the pictures, you've tried, but when you're walking around places in Ireland, they're very marshy, they're very boggy. They're, if you go walking, you know this from probably being out, but maybe people don't know this, but it's very boggy and marshy, and it just makes sense because it's actually not that bad to walk on. You have all, it's there's not too many stones and different things. And
honestly, it's one thing that I highlight in some of my videos, but modern roads are much worse to walk on, because when you have a dry road with sharp stone and you have very thin-soled shoes or no shoes, they're a nightmare to walk on. But like I'll walk across a bog or a forest trail all day, but as soon as I get back on the modern path home, your feet are getting cut up and you're in a terrible way trying to get back.
Okay. And what type of weapons did people have back in those days?
Yeah, so I mean the Kern, actually this will be an interesting one. So a little sneak peek for your viewers before I actually do the video on it. So most notably, the Irish had a very unique type of sword. So this one, the ring hilt sword, which this one is as close a replica as I could get made to two surviving examples. It's a big thank you to Nilo Sword. So just give everyone a quick glance at that. So very notably, the Irish always had hollow ring hilts. Don't really know why. This kind of became the fashion. And even though this is actually a very light sword, but it feels very heavy. All the weight is right at the end of it. So really quite unique and quite odd. But also something that the Irish were very popular. Well, I was very popular amongst them too. I'm in my weapon room here, so I'll just be picking up things as I go. The other one was darts. So this was a big one. Not your conventional pub darts, but
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so kind of like a 6 foot, about 5 or 6 foot shaft with a fletched end on it. And these are kind of popular all across Europe, but seem to have been very, very popular here. And one thing I reckon, just from knowing what Ireland was like at the time, the bows wouldn't really have been that useful because you're in forest most of the time. Whereas if you're throwing something 20, maybe 30 feet, would probably do just as good amount of damage. So I think those were kind of popular for that reason, because the country was at least 50-60% forest at that time. I think now we're at least in single digits of percentage. Like it's a very, very small amount of forest left in the country.
Okay. I give you a bit of advice. Don't bring a first date back to that room anyway. You'll scare them off.
Thankfully, I'm married. She
Oh,
puts up with it.
that's good. That's the best way as well. I just
Yeah.
assume you're still a youthful face and you still look like a young guy. But
You're flattering me, Francis.
so what have you kind of learned about the faction fights and from your research in that? What's your kind of opinion on them?
Yeah, so I mean, we were kind of discussing this just before we came on, and the one thing I think a lot of people don't understand about Irish society who necessarily don't who aren't Irish is that there's a big aversion to violence and has been for a very long time. So often periods of our history, say for the Kern, even for example, they were at their peak about 500 years ago, but Irish history, at least in schools, is basically like Romans, the Vikings, Normans, and then 1916. And it's just glasses over everything. And then it was 1916, War of Independence, and then modern day. And everything else is kind of ignored. So a lot of Irish people aren't familiar with a lot of our own history, and especially when there's violence in it. And the faction fights are a very good example of that, because it's only 2 or 3 generations away for some people. And like the church were involved trying to stamp it out, the GAA, all sections of Irish society. So it was very prevalent. It was very violent, and was going on all over the country. But a lot of Irish people just have no idea about it. So one of the things that I really wanted to research was what was it, what happened, and why was it happening. And that's kind of led me to the folklore archive. I was actually one of the guys who I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with, works there, and just found out about the YouTube work that I was doing. And we got in touch, so I was actually able to go in and trawl through the archives, and that is just a phenomenal goldmine of information. And I know we're chatting to John about doing a film, but this is one where if it was in America, I guarantee there'd be a film on it, because it's brilliant. These lads who had the foresight just after the famine. They knew that there was a generation of Irish people who were gone, and mostly illiterate. They couldn't read or write, but they had all these stories, all these customs, all these traditions, and they knew that if these weren't written down, that they'd be gone forever. So these guys had the foresight to cycle around with an Ediphone, which is like a wax cylinder that you record onto, like a 25-kilo recording device on the back of a bike, going through rural Ireland, going to these people's houses and recording everything you could think of. There's these, when you go into the archive, they have folders, like filing cabinets, and then they have name cards that link to the recordings, or the literally like pencil written accounts from the people. And you have sections. There's an entire drawer dedicated to rain, like just stuff about rain. It's classic Irish, like and down to everything. Like there's sticks in there. There's, for my interest, there was a small section on wrestling, and there was a huge section on stick fighting and faction fights. And that's kind of what led me to sit down there. And on my channel is actually one of the really fascinating recordings of a person who'd seen faction fights and was discussing it. And it's something that within Irish society, it's until I started researching it, I didn't even really know what faction fights were. And it was a very, very turbulent time in Irish society when people were being driven off the land, so they were literally fighting to stay on it. They were fighting each other for the better spots, and things got quite violent. And to actually dive into how these things happened and why they were there, and what was going on at the time, it's been really fascinating, and it's been a real honor to be able to sit in the archive and trawl through this stuff. And even interestingly, we were chatting about the double stick tradition that was in Kerry. I read a good few references to that, and even one fella, I remember his first name was Francis, and I remember that. I forget his second name, but he actually went to Mexico. He was a Kerry man, and then there's reports coming back to Ireland in the late 1800s, anyhow, of him fighting people with double sticks in Mexico. And it's just this one little passage of basically like faction fights continue in the New World. And now maybe you just got into a brawl with someone when he's in Mexico. It doesn't really elaborate, but it's fascinating.
Never heard that before. You see, like what people don't understand is there's a wealth of information out there, and you've only like there's only been scratched the surface. Like there's so much more, and like for you going in to the archives and looking through it, I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit jealous. You know, I'd love to be able to get in there, and you know, it's going to take you quite some time, but yeah, you should like people need to know about this, and I think your channel is a great way to get people interested. Now, can anyone go into the National Archive, or how does
Yeah,
it work?
yeah. You just have to email them. Now, I think it's I'm going to butcher the spelling of this. It's Stocus. I think it's Eeochas. Which if you email them, anyone is able to arrange an in-person visit. So you just sit down. If you kind of know the area you're looking for, like I say, they have those cue cards. So you basically trawl through them, find the area you need, and then they'll be able to cross-reference with the actual written account. So they'll bring in the book, and you can click through to where you're looking for. But from their kind of day-to-day perspective, they have about 12,000 hours of these recordings that they're still trying to work their way through as well.
Wow.
So I mean, it was started, I believe, in late 1800s and continued right up, I think, to about 1970. So there's this huge broad span of just amazing information. Obviously, for someone like me with the work I'm doing, trying to research this stuff and really understand the kind of hows and whys of it, it's just been an absolute treasure trove.
Okay, I'm going to be cheeky here, and I'm going to ask you to bring me there someday. I should come up to Dublin.
Yeah. I'd be happy. Have a cup of tea. We'll go around to the archive.
Yeah, exactly. Like you know, you know you're old when the highlight of your week is going to the archive. But yeah, no, it's as you said there earlier in this podcast or interview, that a lot of these things weren't written down because the Irish weren't literate, they weren't taught at school, you know, and this is you know, most people think this mightn't be a good source of information because like hearsay, but this is how information was passed down. If you're in Ireland and Irish culture, you know that this is a very good, credible source.
Well, there was one bit that the John, who I know in the archive, that this really showed me how credible these are. Where there's one source that they have, one fella who remembered a story that's 30,000 words long, and you can recite it to anyone straight off the bat. And that's basically like the equivalent of the Iliad. Like it's a huge volume. Like, you know, it's a novel near enough, and like this fellow could just recite it off. And that's why it was like, it's amazing that these people had the foresight to sit down and record this stuff.
I think at the time they were just so used to telling the stories that they became you know, a very good source of information. Because like I had this great grandaunt, and she was like in her 90s, and she had told the same stories for a number of years, and they're like you were saying, they would go on. She would tell a story for an hour about the winter of, you know, 1934 when this incident happened, and she'd tell the story verbatim, and then maybe 2 or 3 years later when I'm there again, I hear the same story, and it's like almost word for word, because a lot of these people, they used to work, they used to do different things, and then they would just say these things over and over. So my theory is, and it's only just my own theory that I'm just randomly thinking, is that, you know, they had repeated these stories many times. They had, and again, you see, if you were telling nonsense or bullshit in Ireland, you'd be called out straight away.
Immediately.
So, yeah. Like, you know, in Ireland, you know, there's low tolerance for bullshit. If you're telling a story about something in the past, you have to have the details correct, or locally you'll lose face. You'd be ostracized.
And that brings us on to a good point when it comes to Irish stick fighting. I mean, like a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, some people that like would not have heard my name, or about the you know, what I've been doing. Like I say, it's well, next year, close to 10 years of me teaching. But many Irish people did not believe it was a thing. And it's been it's been such a strange thing, for instance, because I've gone from teaching this for 10 years, right? And now for about the past year teaching the collar and elbow. Never, no one ever bats an eyelid with collar and elbow. You tell them like, oh, there's Irish type of wrestling. They're like, oh yeah, I believe that. You say, oh, we had a type of Irish stick fight. No, that's bullshit. Every single time.
It's something definitely that I even want to emphasize and highlight. It's exactly true you're saying. I know a lot of people, they've never heard of faction fighting. They look at me like I've said, you know, a banshee is real, when, or a leprechaun or something, when I say that faction fighting. They have absolutely no education or knowledge that this was a real thing that happened and a real martial art. And like, I'll give you an example. I went to Comic-Con in Dublin with the kids the week before. I think it was about a week ago. And there was medieval guys fighting from Cork where they do the reenactments. They wear the armor, they have the broadswords. And I thought, oh, these are my kind of guys. You know, I'm going to talk to these. And I went to them and they'd never heard of faction fights. They didn't even know it existed. And, you know, it was a bit shocking to me, but I was trying to educate him, and I was saying, look, I actually mentioned your name. I said, look, there's a guy in Dublin here, Nate. Now, I didn't have your link. I just gave him your name, and I said, like, they should just Google it. You're easy enough to find. And, you know, it was just, as you said there, it's something that I'm keen to highlight, and I know you are as well. It's more of an education thing, and to get people to think about this and understand that, you see, within Ireland, there's a lot of, you can say, like, paddywhackery, you know, like leprechauns and shamrocks and these different things. And Irish people can be a little bit apathetic towards anything that kind of they associate in the same kind of container. And it's all about just kind of opening people's minds and making them a bit more, you know, knowledgeable about historical facts as well. And but yeah, like I'm on your mission, Nathan. You know, we got the word out there. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean that's it's a big part of why I, you know, started the channel, because there's so much of this aspect of Irish history that's and Ireland's a very old country, but not a lot of people like quite understand that we're not even 100 years old yet. I mean, we're just not even 80 years old yet, and as a country, we're still trying to figure out an identity, because for so long we've not been allowed to have one, and so many aspects of Irish history. Like, I always find it very amusing that in the States you have like the Notre Dame football team, and everyone goes, "Oh, the Fighting Irish," and everyone's like, "Oh, Fighting Irish, it's great, isn't it?" Yeah, exactly. You see someone here in Ireland, they'd be like, "Don't, like, stop that!" Like, you know, we're not the Fighting Irish. And then you're trying to explain that, like, no, that was something that we were renowned for, like we were respected for that part of our culture. But now you say it, like, I mean, we were discussing this earlier. A lot of to give people context of how like pervasive this was in Irish culture. When I was a young lad, I went to my parents and asked to learn boxing, and they basically said, like, you don't learn boxing, like that's like guerrillas, like gangsters and thugs do boxing. You don't do boxing. Like, that was how Irish society, it was so ingrained that like violence is terrible. Like, and you know, this was coming off the back of the Troubles too. So like there was very, very much like violence is a very bad thing. We don't want anything to do with it. And Irish culture is not about that. But for a long time, it was, you know, and it was neither good nor bad. It was just something that happened.
But yeah, there's something you said that I'd like to revisit on your videos, is about how the church and indeed the GAA, they shunned upon this aspect of Irish history and culture. They actively took techniques to make people forget about it. And, you know, if you were associated with this or talked about it, you're shunned upon. So it'd be interesting to get your insight on that.
Yeah, actually, I have. I've transcribed it there. So basically, when I go into the archive, I sit down with my camera and I take pictures of the pages and I transcribe it out. Because it's all handwritten, obviously, I put up the pictures. But they've won a few, I think there's 3 pages that I came across just referencing the GAA and their involvement in faction fighting. And there's one that basically says it wasn't until the GAA came along that faction fighting was really destroyed, because anytime that it was involved, either you were ostracized from your community and you couldn't be involved in the GA, or for a lot of these, and this is something that's interesting about the faction fights too, is that often fights were at fair days. That's when people would meet up. So anyone even in a rural community would kind of understand that there's a big fair, everyone's going to come around and visit. But often that was when sporting events would happen too. So that's when you do hurling, you do, you know, gated football, whatever it was. And that's usually when faction fights would break out. And the GAA really rooted these out at these fairs and completely stamped it out. So they didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want Irish people to be in any way seen in any way violent. And the same with the church. I mean, even up until very recent times, the church were very much against any sort of violent activity. I mean, people don't really understand, even like with the history of boxing, like that was outlawed for quite a long time. And the church had a lot of say in, you know, persuading people away from it. Which is actually one of the interesting things, even with the collar and elbow. There's an interesting account of how it was the only combat sport that was appropriate for ladies. because it was no blood was shed in it, so that you could bring a lady to watch it. So like obviously, if you consider something about like faction fighting where skulls are getting split open, it was very much not for polite society.
Yeah, no, it was like the collective consciousness was definitely adheres, wasn't really too fond of that aspect of Irish culture. But like the thing is, I can understand that people want to change attitudes and they want to portray themselves in a light. But how do you think people will change their attitudes about this time in the past, and how will you try to move forward with your knowledge?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it's kind of a twofold thing. Like, I think a lot of Irish people just need to know that it happened, because a lot of people don't. Like, the interesting thing with the faction fights is that they were kind of happening in and amidst the famine, and for quite a while after, and also a little bit before. Like, it's kind of this window, and a lot of people just focus on the famine, and there's so much politics wrapped up in that, and for various good reasons and various different reasons. But it doesn't change the fact that these things happened, and it's like I was saying to you earlier. You can take whatever view you want on it. You can be very far one way or the other. It doesn't change the fact that that happened, and
Right.
that's kind of where I'm coming at the channel. Like I'm in no way politically aligned in any direction, but these things happened. I have a genuine interest in them, and I want Irish people to understand them, and I also want them to take pride in our history, because I mean, even with the Kern, what's really fascinated me is that like the oldest songs that we have in Irish are from that period. Like there's the Lament of Rory O'More. It's considered one of the oldest Irish songs that we have, and like to the point it became so popular that even in England there was nobility asking for it, and people were would be shocked like, oh, we literally Irish rebel tunes in in English high society, like and there's all these things that have this weird um, societal weight behind them, like rebel tunes. I mean, that's the classic example. In the States, people will listen to that and they're like, "Oh, it's a great Irish song." Whereas here, you wouldn't be driving down the road blaring it out the windows. Like you'd be turning that down. I'm not sure who'd be listening. Like,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of that. That's kind of where I coming out with this. Is that like I want to show people that this was a thing, and for us to kind of take pride and understand this part of Irish history, because how it's taught and how it's done in school is just this huge window for hundreds of years where just no one really knows what was going on.
Okay. So explain to people there that don't know, what is collar and elbow like? What's that about?
Yeah, so I mean that's a quite a fascinating one, and the interesting thing. So this style was huge, and like I said, it's very straightforward. The rule set, like you grab someone around the back, the scruff of the collar, and one hand on the clasp. There we go, just here below the elbow. And there's been huge work done by Ruan McFadden, and you can actually check out his book. It's wherever you buy books, and you'll be able to find it. But you
Kindle.
look up collar and elbow wrestling, you'll find it. But basically, in the mid to late 1800s, it was considered one of the most popular styles of wrestling globally. There's loads of accounts of people doing it in Canada, North America, England, Ireland, France, even as far afield as New Zealand. And it was just a hugely popular style, and it was kind of referred to as a fist fight with the feet because you had these fixed grips. The whole idea was more to trip each other. And that for me. So like I've done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 10 years and a bit of judo and stuff as well. Like, so it really interested me to go and try to figure out this thing. And now the unfortunate thing about it is we don't have any books on it. Again, a lot of this was being done at rural fairs. There is actually a very interesting picture. I forget the name of it, but if I remember, I'll let you know. But it's basically a fair in Glendalough and Wicklow. And there's two young boys in the background, and the picture is sometime in the mid 1800s it was done. You see two boys with the collar and elbow grip wrestling, and there's some, obviously their father or uncle is up and standing there watching them. And they're literally just in the background of the painting, like up on a hill, but you can very clearly see these two boys wrestling. And it was just kind of the accepted rule set all across Ireland. There was different variations of it. Kildare had a specific rule set, and often like the best wrestlers in the world were considered to come out of there. I don't know how true that is today, but any Kildare men can let me know.
So is there is like is there any kind of structure to it, or is it like how does someone win? Like say for
Yeah, so I mean the rule set. That's the one thing we do know. There is 2 or 3 rule sets that were agreed upon. So Kildare actually even had their own one, which the way that you win, you get there's basically 3 types of fall. So if someone drops to the ground and they land on their side, that's 1 point. Or if they land clean on their back, so let's say you throw them over your head and they land flat in the back, very much like judo, the match is over. You get 3 points and you win. Or else there's what's called a dog fall, where you both fall at the same time. Kind of the idea of like 2 dogs going at each other, falling on the ground. So if you both fall that way, then it's just there's no point. You stand back up.
Okay, and like you have to do a few rounds or something, or is there like
yeah. So it's in modern context for us, we've added in time limits. But back in the day, it would have just been you keep going until one person lands. Some of the matches taken quite a while as a result. And for us now, one of the interesting things, and it's one of the interesting things with just martial arts in general in the past, there was obviously you're relying on a jacket because you can't just grab the skin around the back of someone's neck. So for a long time, they were trying to figure out what was the best thing to wear. So some lads would even cheat by wearing like big, thick trench coats, like all the way down to their feet so you couldn't see what they're doing. Or some lads would even wear like their steel toe work boots so they could just spoof the other fellow in the shins.
typical? That's
Yeah, classic Irish fighting, like.
Yeah.
And then some fellas even made what looked kind of like I don't even know how you describe it. You know, the shoulder harness that like James Bond would wear. These
Oh, yeah.
like little shoulder, like so that they could grab that instead.
Yeah.
But for us now, we have kind of like a canvas jacket, since it's the closest material that you'd get to a jacket that would have been worn at the time. So yeah, lots of like messing around with the fellas back in the day. But yeah, for us now, we have kind of an agreed upon rule set, and kind of it's one of the interesting things with especially with my guys in our group, that the more we do it, the more kind of little interesting things that we're starting to figure out. I know the head of the gym is Tom Higgins. I forget the name of their gym, but there's a group in Texas who are really starting to take off now as well. And it's a nice one because it was even traditionally practiced out in open fields because you're not doing a lot of very big explosive throws. So it is one that you don't necessarily need a lot of equipment for if you just want to kind of take it upon yourself and try learn it. So it's been a really fun one to kind of be at the forefront of trying to get it going again.
Okay, and like you have a class, is it? You have a group set up in Dublin?
Yeah. So we do a Colour and Elbow class every Monday in Universal Space. So it's in Dublin, just off of Cable Street. And then on Tuesday, we do our Irish stick fighting classes as well. And hopefully we'll expand that out. So hopefully people are watching, come to lots of them. And then we can do even more classes.
Yeah, Ireland is of the restriction. The past 2 years, everyone's life has been paused. Like what have we been doing? And you've been useful. You've been like going out and doing things, trying to, and like we need more people like you, Nathan, that are getting out there. I suggest people get involved in collar and elbow. I said collar and elbow collar. But you know what I would love to see is some tournaments, some events.
Yeah.
And
that's one thing that we're really trying to push for this year. One thing we'd love to do. One thing as well, like obviously we need more people around the country doing it so that we can pursue it as well. But we do know of a few locations even around Ireland where tournaments were held. So there's a place, the Hollow in Phoenix Park. We'll try, hopefully, do a little guerrilla tournament there at some point. Just sneak in and do one. It was so it was basically like a bowl with just raised bank all around the sides. But even in the 1800s, there was references of like thousands of people showing up to sit there and watch these matches. People would stand around the edge and hold everyone back, and the boys in the middle wrestle.
I'm quite happy. If you ever need any support or anything that I can do, I'd be very happy to be involved. I do collar and elbow just with my family all the time. Get to bed now, and the kids are struggling not to try to get them into bed. So.
Exactly.
But no, I look honestly, I do appreciate, and I'm a big fan of what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to highlight these different things. I do believe collar and elbow has a really bright future ahead. I think that the more people that are aware of it, just like any like the UFC, how that started, and it just like what you do, you need to like. I'm from a marketing background. I can help you on that side of things. You need videos. You need lots of content to just constantly put out there. You need to be showing people getting slammed. You need to be in close-ups. You need guys with sweat. You need to have women there as well. Like if the marketing is done on this, it can be very very popular and get these events going as well. And if you ever need some assistance on that or the marketing side of things, I definitely
appreciate it.
Value. And physically, no, I could be a
Well, I mean,
referee.
an interesting thing actually, just with Colin about even the archives. I'd actually heard about this a while ago, but then I actually found the newspaper cutting of it in the archives. So there's a few Celtic styles of wrestling that are still going, and one of them's in Brittany. It's a style called Guren or Goren. Any French people can correct me on that. But they actually sent a team over in the late 80s to Ireland to see if there was any Colin and Elbow still going. There's this amazing little article, and then they went around to Ireland and to demo their style of wrestling and got a bit drunk on a load of cheap Irish wine. But yeah, it's interesting to see like even those styles were really interested in trying to keep this stuff going. And we've actually had a lot of interest from the Breton wrestling community to actually go over there and do some stuff and go back and forth. Because a lot of people don't really know about these traditional styles of wrestling. I mean, even Scotland, they have a style called back hold up there. You literally just clasp your hands around the back of someone like that.
Yeah.
And that's an unbroken line going way, way back, and there's still guys still practicing that, still training.
If a tournament such as that with the slapping of the face can become popular,
yeah, exactly.
Like you've seen the videos of the guys and they slap each other back and forth. If something like that can gain popularity, something way more credible will catch up.
A little easier on the face.
Yes, and sure, it's not too violent. Sure, women and kids could attend. And no, look, it's we might kind of just wrap this up now for today. Yeah. And just to kind of finish as well, like how do people connect on you? Of course, your YouTube channel, but if there's any other information you want to give or anything else you're doing.
Yeah, so obviously for the YouTube stuff, it's Rambling Kern. You'll find that same on Instagram, same on Facebook, and then Kern School of Combat is the school I teach with. So you'll have the Irish stick fighting classes and the collar and elbow classes through there. Like I say, we do them every Monday and Tuesday in Dublin City Centre. Or you can email me at ramblingkern@gmail.com if you're interested in anything or trying to get a study group up and running, or if you just want to train with me personally. Whatever people are interested in. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure for having me on, Francis. I do appreciate it.
But keep doing the YouTube videos. That's really how I noticed you, because like you see people on these forums on Facebook and you don't really know them, but when you get onto Facebook, your personality, or your YouTube, your personality comes out, your passion comes out, and the content is just good. You have a good channel. And again, I'll end this video the same as I started. Please go to the Rambling Kern. If you're a subscriber of me, if you like my sticks, if you think I'm a good guy, even if you hate me, go to his channel, click like, watch his content, judge for yourself. Okay, his content speaks volumes. I suggest you definitely look at the video of the listening. Also,
I think you're breaking up on us there, Francis.
Yeah. Okay.